Thank you all for coming along to hear a little bit more about what Deakin University Library's been doing with some of our special collection material. A lot of the detail will be in the written paper, so I'll sort of talk to some of the issues and things that we discovered along the way. The resources themselves we'll talk a little bit about, some of the work issues we had to work through to make it all happen. None of this happens just of its own. And I'd also like to thank my co-authors. It has been a team effort to both get these digitisations happening, but also to write the paper. Well, I have to say, after hearing about the Science Museum in London this morning, I think this seems very small beer and in comparison, but it's quite a different scale. We'll cope. Okay, now the digitisation projects themselves. A little bit of background. We started off in earnest, I suppose, in around 2016 on these two projects, although some of them had a little bit of an earlier genesis. Deakin University Library has been digitising material from our special collection for many years, and so I suppose in some ways this is a continuation of that process. We do try to select resources that have not already been digitised by another library, and we also try and pick items which will support the research interests of the university. That's an important link for me, that we actually have a current link to interests. We work with material that is unique sometimes to both us and the rest of the world, and the two projects that I'll speak about today are quite like that. They're unique to us, and it's very unlikely that other people are going to be doing the same sort of work, which is one of the reasons why we went ahead and picked them. They're certainly different. They both offered us challenges, and I have to say it took us out of our comfort zone in some areas as we worked through the way to get this up and running, perhaps as well as we could. This content is really from a different time and place. It's from the 1800s in one case, and the middle 1900s in another. But hopefully we still have that relevance to today. A little bit about background, I suppose, to field notes and field notebooks. It's a specific type of document, and it has its own set of challenges. It's very much a primary source, and in the case of the GIL ones we'll be talking about, very personal and individualised as well. I guess each scientist will approach their field notes in a different way. GILs are very, very rich and full of detail, and that's, I guess, what makes some of the value into them as well. In the example here, we can see some of the complexity that you get in a page. There's a photograph, an illustration, annotations around the edges, some original, some added later, etc. And that's just page 66 of one notebook. It's a real challenge to bring this sort of information out of the box or the storage, or in our case, filing cabinet, which was how it was described to begin with, and turn stuff into actual usable resources. So a little bit more on the Ed and Gilfield notebooks. We're very lucky to have this collection. It came to us through the Gill family. And as I said, it started off in a set of filing cabinets, but in fact, over Gill's time, he kept about 60 notebooks, and Deakin, in fact, holds 17 of those. The remainder are held by the State Library Victoria, but the ones that we've got mostly refer to Gill's work in Western Victoria, and that is one of the emphases of our special collection. Western Victoria is one of the key themes that we collect in. You'll see from some of the examples as we go through that Gill had very wide interests, and he was prolific in adding extra content to his notes. You'll see here there's a photograph. It has been dated, it's 1932. It's down around Warrnambool, etc. And these sort of photos and extra additional information are added throughout the notebooks. But more on photos and some of the challenges that they pose later on. I'd have to say that the notebooks are very much personalised. You can see they're handwritten. Different coloured inks here indicate that there was an original draft. You went back, added extra annotations and things, sometimes years later, to the notebooks. And that gives a richness and a depth of content. they become very much an evolving resource. He didn't only have scientific information, he actually used his notebooks for some personal reflections. And if you have a look at the full paper, we've taken one quote in that which I thought was sort of quite interesting. He said, and this is an edited version, so many possible things are not attempted and not even contemplated because they are accepted as impossible. This is one of the limitations in scientific research. I wanted to measure the amount of coastal retreat in the past 6,000 years since the sea returned to its present level. Forget it, my colleague said. It's impossible. The sea has destroyed the evidence, but I found it could be done. Many such impossible things have been done. Do not accept anything as impossible until they have been proved so, and even then keep an open mind. That was Gill in circa 1970, we think, out of book 53. But he used it to reflect, and that adds an added sort of personal interest to them. You'll see also here that he's added photos, drawings and diagrams. They're a rich resource. Another example of some of the pages here. There's a lot of geological stuff. You can see he's taken a diagram from a paper, added his own colouring and detail. On the other page there's a map, but the interesting bits there is he's taken the effort to go and talk to local experts in there, and he's put the local names of the various parts of the coast in which weren't more widely noted on the map. There's also notations there about Aboriginal middens, where they were located, how the coast has changed, etc. Interesting. And he does give the citation there of Archie Matheson as where he got that information from. You can see here there's also a couple of inherent copyright challenges. This material has been taken from other sources, cut and pasted into his notebooks. He was a very early adopter of cut and paste. In the old school method, there's a lot of examples like this through the notebooks. This is another interesting sort of one. He's used this postcard as the starting point for a whole range of different annotations and observations. It's a bit hard to read his writing here, but there's historical observations, annotations which have been added later on, cross-references to other notebooks. On the right-hand side you'll see accurate data obtained from the standard, which will be the Warrnambool standard. See book 57, 338. So he's tying his resources together, and these were working notes. As you go through some of the slides, you will see he has had interest in geology, archaeology, ecology, volcanology, megafauna, paleoclimates, a wide range of interests, but something for an awful lot of other disciplines as well. A little bit of background to field specimens to go to another extreme. These are very much related but quite different resources to the field notebooks. You can see here that this is a dried and pressed seaweed sample. But what makes these specimen collections unique is in fact some of the contextual information that the collector puts there, where they were collected, conditions, dates, all of that sort of thing. And without that, some of the value would have been lost. But we have that in this example. Bearing in mind also that they have inherent problems. At 150 odd years old, they are going to be fragile. But they do give us that snapshot in time and space of that collecting period. So, the book of specimens we've got is by William Harvey. And here's a sort of title page of what he was interested, algae, from the Ceylon, the Friendly Islands in Australia, as part of his collecting exhibitions over the early 1850s. They really informed his formal publications on phycology, which is the scientific study of algae. And without that field specimen information, it's very hard to then go on and do the formal publications. And he had several books of these specimens that he created over those years. A couple of example pages, different sizes, different sorts of annotations, all put together quite nicely after he'd collected them. These are from our Deakin copy. It's a bound volume of these pages. A lot of handwritten titles, handwritten notes and page numbers. Covers over 600 specimens. It's a really quite detailed resource, of which about 225 come from Australia. I did like some of the local connections to Geelong and the Western District that Harvey had. He collected in Victoria in 1854, did a little bit around Port Phillip, Western Port, Queenscliff, Port Fairy, but one of the notations from our online exhibition about this was that Geelong, the shore, is ill-adapted for algae. Obviously the bay wasn't as good as some of the coastal beaches, and he was very much less than complimentary about the sheets in his hotel in Queenscliff. But this adds a whole range of extra interest to what was a very detailed collecting expedition. Then we get to the digitisation aspect, and there are challenges indeed. It's very valuable to do that work, because otherwise they're in a box or a filing cabinet and no one can find them. But there are issues. They have to be done with care. They can be fragile, they can be illegible. You could see from some of Gill's handwritten notes, you really have to work to read them. But once digitised, there's other work to be done as well. They all benefit from some finding aids, some extra information and description just to make them accessible. Translation of the writing and annotations. We have a transcription of the Gill work, so that you can in fact search that file for keywords, but you could never do that with the actual just straight digitised version. That was a lot of volunteer time spent doing that. There's always more work in these projects, and in fact we've only just dipped our toe into the water with the Gill notebooks. We could spend many more hours and months making that material more accessible, and in fact completing the set of notebooks. We haven't done them all yet. A little bit about the process on digitisation projects that we use at Deakin. This is the sort of life cycle of our special collections when we digitise something. And it's an umbrella. You're supposed to plan, copyright check, dispatch, do the metadata, review, etc., etc. But that's almost a simplistic approach because it's always more complicated. At some points along that life cycle, we may in fact find that we don't want to go further. I'll use an example of copyright. We've got some great stuff in the special collection, but it's still in copyright, and the amount of work to bring it into a digitisation project is probably not going to be cost effective or too time consuming. However, having said that, if there was something which we were really interested in, we would take that conscious decision to go ahead, get the permissions, get the copyright clearances, etc. It's just that makes it that much more difficult. All of the material which you do digitise, we keep in DRO, which is our Deakin Research Online. It's part of our repository, but it's also where we can keep this digitised material safe. The process for the Harvey field specimens was difficult. All of those seaweed specimens were very fragile. You almost don't want to open the book in case something falls off. You have to be able to get to it to use it. That took us outside of our normal approach. It was obvious that standard scanning was not going to work. Photography sort of presented itself as a good option. We took some test shots using our university photographer. Yes, you could do it that way, but it wasn't going to meet the necessary technical standards and so on that we would like for a long-term digitisation project. We approached the National Herbarium of Victoria for the special advice and the equipment that was needed. They had done this sort of thing before. It makes a lot of sense to use the expertise and the specialist approach, and we thank them for that. They had a very specific tech setup. I'm not going to go through all of that. You can read the details or take notes from the paper. But there's a summary here, but you can see from the photograph, particular lighting, particular padding, camera stands, all of that sort of thing are required. Now, an organisation like Deakin could do that, but I doubt whether it's worth the time, effort and money that would be involved when you've got specialised advice available to us. Another photo of that specialised setup. From this we get a better result, higher quality images, preservation standard sort of results, And we just can't do it ourselves. It's not really cost effective. It's much smarter to go out to the experts. Another photo. Again, you can see it's a fragile piece of material there. It needed that padding, the interleaving into the fields just to get the levels right for photographs, etc. Very important to get that done properly. And I'm glad that I wasn't trying to do it. We took advice from some senior botanical researchers so that we got the result which would be most useful to researchers. You can see here we've got scale bars. The researcher also pointed out that true colour was incredibly important if they want to go back and check those sort of things. He specifically said, reduce shadows, we don't want shadows. And you can see there's not too much shadowing in these sort of images. This is quite nice. One's from Port Fairy, one's from Geelong. So in fact, you did find something on the Geelong shore. Just was not very complimentary about it. Okay. The Gill notebooks, more traditional. We could use Datacom and outsource that. They've got the right equipment for book type material. The Gill ones, not quite as breakable as the Harvey, but there were issues like content written right to the edge of pages, all that sort of stuff, legibility that they had to work with. Permissions and copyright. I will mention this without going into the hours that were involved. I'll concentrate perhaps on the Gill material as it's more recent. The Harvey stuff was old enough to not be a problem. Some people say it's better to seek forgiveness than ask for permission, but it's far better to seek permission where possible and then ask for forgiveness if everything turns pear-shaped and hasn't worked for you. We did get permission from the Gill family, which was really important to use the books. The photos, clippings, journal articles, maps, postcards and tables were a problem. Time-consuming. Needed detective skills from a whole range of different people, and we had a real effort of a lot of people organising to do some of that. Finding one set of photo ownerships involved genealogical skills, door knocking, ringing around and then going house to house to find the person who was the relative of the original photographer. Really involved, and that was over and above the call of duty. Metadata, difficult. As I said, we started off with a description of 4 cabinets. Not very helpful, 4 filing cabinets as a description. From that we've added a breakdown of the different parts of the collection. There's still more work to be done, but if you go in and Google Edmund Dwen Gill notebooks in DRO, Fusion, Trove, all of those records come up and they're quite accessible. We had to do some authority work. He was often had his middle name quoted as Owen rather than Dwen. A mistake you can see, but we did some work around that as well. Linked data is difficult. I'm not going to go into it too much, but we really started doing things by hand. We've added some stuff into Wikipedia, included some links to other holdings, online exhibitions, etc. Promotions and exhibitions were important for us. We've got an online exhibition software using Amiga. We call it Fusion. If you want to look at those live exhibitions, just have a look at Fusion, Deakin and either Gill or Harvey. It'll come up fairly quickly. It's an opportunity to expand on a base description. You can add the curated story, which is really quite nice. Same for the Harvey one. It lets you do a bit about the specimens, his travels, etc., and a bibliography, endnotes and all that sort of stuff. Very useful to have a look at in more detail. We adapted some of the photos to a large AV format. This is our Verge display at the Geelong Waterfront campus. We use those 5 screens to sort of get passing interest and traffic. Really useful, give a taste of what was available and the opportunity to refer it back to the physical book in our special collection. Took a lot of time and effort to do, but the end result was quite attractive. We did do some launches, held a launch down in Warrnambool for the Gill material, very successful, got local newspaper interest, highlighted the fact that researchers from Victoria University, Melbourne University are actually using some of this digitised content already in their research. That's a bit of a win. The seaweed material, we've only just closed an exhibition in Alfred Deakin Prime Ministerial Library Gallery on the waterfront campus, and that was a tie-in of the original book of collected specimens and some current research photographs. Very good to do. I'll have a quick run through some of that to give you a feel for what it looked like. Donna Squire, our university photographer, took a lot of the macro photographs that made up this exhibition. It's a proper gallery space with those prints of seaweed. They're really quite attractive. Made good use of the gallery space. You can see we've got some glass cases there for the original, and that sits alongside the current photos. Used quotations from some of the current academics at Deakin. Really nice to have that connection back to the current researchers. A really good tie-in, I think. And it was nice the way that was put up on the wall alongside the prints. As I said before, they're macro photos on a light box, really quite attractive. I'm nearly there. And it's good, that juxtaposition of old and new research. It also gave us the opportunity to put in those display cases some of the other special collection materials on natural history and seaweeds. And it was quite popular with the visitors. The most important visitor, the Vice-Chancellor, came down and had a look, and she wanted copies of the photos. So I think we won a few brownie points there. I don't know if she actually got them, but she was expressing interest. Very quickly, some of the lessons learned. Both projects were different but had some similar issues. They needed more robust project management. They had an organic start, and then we had to pull back into shape some of the work and structures to make them work better. They needed that guidance from the beginning, so always expect that a project like this will get much bigger than you first expected and plan accordingly. Collaboration, communication, really important, and we had a lot of people involved in particularly the GIL project. The technology is helpful but frustrating at the same time, so be prepared for delays, false starts and so on. It takes time to assess and manipulate this sort of data and get the best possible result, but the end result is, again, worth it. I said before, there's always a lot more work. We could do a huge amount of extra finding aids and work on these collections. You could add geotagging, more linked data. Just digitising more of the GIL collection will be important. So that's the very quick Cook's tour of the paper. More detail in that, of course, but I will leave it at that for the moment. If anyone wants to follow up with any of the authors, myself, Bernadette Houghton from the technical point of view, or Kristen Thornton from the special collections, please feel free to contact us. Thank you.
Well, as a way of warming things up, yes, you touched on your lessons learnt, and I just wondered whether, with these being products of scientific inquiry, whether there were anything you thought was sort of particular to that particular sphere as opposed to some of the other collections that we might ponder digitising.
Well, for me, the key thing is to get some input from the current researchers. In a university environment, I'm very keen that, in fact, the current research groups in the schools, etc., can have a connection back to the stuff. You don't always get that, but to me that's a really useful thing to get in place. It gives an added value to the whole thing. Wouldn't perhaps be so much with some other areas, but it's hard to think of a project where you couldn't try at least to tie it back to your current research or teaching interests.
You were talking about copyright, and from your perspective, who owns the digital images of the algae?
All right, there were several different images. The current ones, Deakin does, because that was the current research that our photographer did. So Deakin owns that copyright, and we can do those displays, etc. The originals, we've created them from a work which is out of copyright, effectively. So I guess we own those too.
Oh, no, you don't.
So the work that was done at the
I'm sorry to say.
No.
So the work done or performed by the RBG, you own?
Well, we contracted them to do that work.
Yep.
Yeah.
And therefore have in fact purchased the work as part of the deal. No, look, the original creator, of course, owns the copyright, but we've created the images of something which is out of copyright.
Yeah. So therefore, I would say, going by from the National and State Libraries' perspective and from the public domain perspective and Europeana, you don't create new copyright by making a digital surrogate of an out-of-copyright work. So from my perspective, from the State Library of Queensland and through the National and State Libraries, that's a position we hold very firmly to. Other people have different views, but we don't say that there is new copyright vested in an out-of-copyright work that's been digitised.
And quite frankly, of course, we're making this openly available and access. It's not an issue from that sort of perspective.
That was going to be the next question.
Yeah.
So if it's out in the public domain...
It's in the public domain.
So
people can make use of it, use it, link to it, view it. Good. It's getting the information out there, which is the important thing, so people can reuse it.
Well, if it was from our collection, we wouldn't give a toss. So if it's material that's in the public domain, so it's out of copyright material that has been, I guess, the custodians, the library has been, and as a publicly funded organisation, we are funded by members of the public. It's in the public domain. You can make a copy of it and use it for whatever you want. You want to put it on a tote bag or a T-shirt, that's fine. We do ask that, so I guess I'm just jumping in here. From our perspective, that if you're using material that's got, we don't wholesale make public domain Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander material available because there are cultural sensitivities around that, but we have a fairly open slather perspective on that.
And I'd have some concerns if someone wanted to commercialise some of that Gill stuff. It belongs to the Gill family and they've given permission for us to use it, so that would be problematic. Yeah, it's out there. I would hope that people would.
Oh, is it licensed under CC BY? Oh, okay. Non-commercial. That's fantastic, because that material itself is in copyright material, so that makes it very explicit what people can and can't do, so that's wonderful.
Etc., etc. And
yes.
Look, it's not going to
And
appear
oh, what a tangled web we weave.
It's not going to appear on a T-shirt, I'm pretty sure. Thank you.
Just goes to show there's nothing like copyright to warm up a Q&A session. So please join me with thanking Colin yet again, and I'm just going to present him with this speaker pin.